Okay, so I'm going to share part two to my story. My story was at Keystone Hooks Middle School. It was called J&F. And that whole year of eighth grade, I had pretty much barely made it. I was more or less, our family was getting by. Our home was in shambles. My dad was in jail, and my mom was trying to get it together, more or less. And I remember waking up early in the morning, probably like 5:30 in the morning, and working out. And I thought a lot of people during that time, especially people that took the time to care, because to me, caregivers in this were becoming more and more important. When there's neglect and abuse going on at home, the caregivers have to be particularly, let's just say, they have to meet a criteria to have the responsibilities that they have. And not just anybody can be a caregiver. And as things were deteriorating at home, and it's been that way for a while, where you don't have to explain yourself like 20 times. Once abuse is reported, or neglect, or any of those things, it's just a matter of when and where, when when are we leaving, and how long is it going to take. And the reason I talk about domestic violence shelters is that you want efficient shelters to work and operate. And I had to report abuse that occurred before, so I know there's a paperwork, and it's an agonizing process for everybody involved, especially because in a lot of cases it may end up separating children from parents. And going back to eighth grade, I got called into the guidance office, and because I had missed at that point 100 days of school, and I wasn't the type of student that would miss school, but because there was bullying and other things going on, that left me in a situation where I was in the guidance office at that point. And I'm a very alert person. I have a keen sense of alertness because of my survivor issues. So, and I have good reason for being that way, because there had been neglect going on, and I got only better as I got older, more sharper. And whenever I notice certain personality traits around certain individuals, I know that something's going to work or it's not going to work. And not all relationships are right. Um, I look at, like, how they have eHarmony. Well, I would say the same for um, fostering children or being a caregiver to children or adults. And from my observation, not all relationships are supposed to work, because just there's certain things that are missing that make it so. So I shared my story because I have been able to be in an observation role. And after what I've gone through personally, I can see why, like, they have to meet a criteria. And if I was a supervisor or director, I would do that, because I know that a lot of relationships um, are not meant to be. And I'm okay with myself enough to say that. That's why anytime children are matched up with other children in like play therapy, it's because they have to have a certain criteria. And it would be the same thing with some of the medical facilities and institutions today, that we want change to happen in these programs and reform. And this is from an observation role, and this is because we were directly impacted by abuse in foster care. That we wrote letters to state representatives, and we've been still continuing that process. Anytime there's abuse reported in foster care or abuse, again, it goes through the foster care, it goes back to the county, it goes back to the judge. And because there have been years of neglect beforehand, it's really up to the school district to make the right decisions. And a lot of times the school district, no fault of their own, they have to, understand that there may be other things going on that may have led up to that fateful appointment. And that's where I was in 8th grade. Things had come to a proverbial head. And I get emotional thinking about it because I know how difficult it is to get out of a bad situation, because I know there's no easy way out. There's a lot of times, and even up to this point, where you'll notice that the men are not around, and all you got is girls in a, not shelter so much, but hotel. And that's because it goes through what I believe a process, or a lot of times the cycle of abuse. And you can only go through so much. There's like limitations. Like, I thank God for the counselors that I have been able to develop a relationship with for the most part. I prayed a lot too. But usually when it's domestic violence, most women that are escaping abuse are or end up in shelters, or oftentimes a hotel. And that's where most of the people that I know, and myself included, ended up. And there's a lot of women that still haven't really gotten through the point that I'm at. And I still believe I have a long way to go in recovery. Domestic violence recovery is not easy. It's a painful ordeal staying in it, though. Most women that stay in abuse don't get the help they need. And that outreach is vital. It's very important. If you want things to get better in your life, it is important to reach out and talk about whatever it is that's going on, so that you don't have to stay in abuse and you don't have to continue that abuse cycle. A lot of times, because victims become abused, they may end up going into another relationship where there's abuse already. I mean, it's like some of it is a repeat pattern. So the whole point to getting help is to break the cycle of abuse. And I recommend highly that young women, especially young women that have children, get into counseling long enough before they start another relationship. And it's only for health reasons. It's very unhealthy to be in a relationship again and again and again and repeat that pattern again. That's why I share this, because a lot of times what happens is women think that the relationship problem will go away because, it's a different person. And a lot of times it may be the person in it. And a lot of times it's the women that need the help. You know, like a lot of people take sides in domestic violence, but a lot of times it might be the men that need help, and the women that are in that relationship might be the abusers. So not every situation's a cookie cutter situation. It goes case by case. There's a lot of men that are victims of abuse, and a lot of times they're victims of the system. And that's where I want to go with this from this point, is about the men that are victims of the system. They either grow up in it, or they're in the system, like they're in the jail system. And fortunately, there are decent judges that listen to both sides, and they don't just take the mother's side. Normally, the mother gets first priority. But in a lot of cases now, because there's more and more awareness about domestic violence impacts everybody. So it's not as if the man only is the perpetrator in the relationship. A lot of times, again, like I said, men can be the victims of it. So I hope that by sharing this, that, you know, I didn't give you stats and figures. I just gave you an observation of what I've been through. I will say this, that after talking to the guidance counselor and the process began, we ended up in court. And I'm at that point now where we're going back to court about my truck right now. And there are a lot of people that are not a part of my life, and it's okay, because I know that this process works, and when you reach out for help, you will get results. Thank you for listening to the second part of this video.